Zara's legs shook as she walked into the grand chamber. The massive room made her feel tiny. 12 tall seats rose like mountains around her, each one holding a representative from the most powerful species in the galaxy. Her torn research clothes felt dirty and wrong in this clean, bright place. Her 4 arms trembled as she tried to stand straight. The scars on her dark shell still hurt from her escape 3 days ago. She could smell the fear coming from her own body, but she had to do this. Someone had to listen. "Council members," Zara began, her voice cracking. "I am Zara Kethval, lead xenobiologist from Research Colony 7 on Kepler 404-2b. I come before you today because my world is dead. All 847 of my colleagues are gone." The Zefkari representative flickered with angry blue light. Another hysterical report from the worker species. Zara's knees hit the metal floor with a loud clang. The sound echoed through the chamber as she pressed her hands together in the ancient pose of desperate pleading. "Please, honored ones, listen to me. We found something terrible while digging in the old ruins." The crystal being that spoke for the crystalline conquered made a sound like breaking glass. "Your species is known for seeing danger where none exists." Zara pulled out a small data pad with shaking hands. "We were studying the archaeological site on level 7. Dr. Mextor found a sealed chamber that our scans said was empty. But when we opened it, there was this gray dust inside. Just a small amount." She looked up at the faces staring down at her. Some looked bored. Others seemed annoyed. The dust started to grow. Within 6 hours, it had covered the entire dig site. By the second day, it had reached our main building. The substance did not just kill my friends, it changed them. The representative from the Aquarian Federation made a bubbling sound of disbelief. "Even if this wild story is true, the planet is isolated." Zara's voice broke. "You do not understand. This is not a normal biological agent. It learns. It adapts. It consumed Dr. Yell 9 while she was still alive, and I could see her knowledge flowing into the gray mass." She pulled up holographic images from her data pad. The pictures showed gray fungus covering buildings, vehicles, and equipment. In some images, shapes that might once have been people stood perfectly still, their bodies covered in the spreading gray substance. By the 3rd day, the thing had learned how to use our equipment. It sent messages to our supply ships using our own communication systems. It was trying to spread itself off-world. I only escaped because Dr. Chen 5 locked me in an emergency pod and launched it manually. The representative from the ethereal collective spoke with a voice like wind through leaves. "The economic cost of investigating every unconfirmed threat would bankrupt the Council." Zara crawled forward on her knees, holding up her data pad. "Please, look at the biological scans. Look at the genetic patterns. This thing is not natural. Someone made it long ago as a weapon." She could not finish the sentence. The images of her friends being consumed alive played in her mind over and over again. The tall, pale representative from the Nordric Empire spoke in a cold voice. "The Velthari are useful workers, but they are not scientists. Their understanding of complex biological processes is limited." Hours passed. Zara answered every question, showed every piece of data she had saved. She explained the timeline, the spread rate, the way the substance seemed to think and plan. She begged them to send a research team, a military investigation, anything. But she could see the decision in their eyes long before they voted. These beings had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. They had seen real threats before, and they had dealt with them. A frightened bug person from a mining colony was not going to change their minds. The vote came quickly. 11 species voted to classify her report as unsubstantiated panic and place Kepler 442b under standard monitoring. Only one representative voted to investigate immediately. Zara looked up at the human woman who had spoken for her. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez was smaller than most of the other representatives, but something about her seemed stronger. Her dark eyes met Zara's, and for the first time in days, Zara did not feel completely alone. As the other council members filed out of the chamber, discussing trade agreements and dinner plans, Zara remained on her knees in the center of the empty room. She had failed. 847 people had died horrible deaths, and she could not even make anyone believe it had happened. Footsteps echoed across the metal floor. Ambassador Rodriguez walked over and knelt down beside Zara. The human woman was the same height as Zara now, looking directly into her compound eyes. "I believe you," the human said quietly. "My people have made some terrible mistakes with biological weapons in our past. We know what they can do." Zara felt something wet running down her face. She had not realized that Velthari could cry until that moment. Zara asked. Ambassador Rodriguez helped her stand up. "Now we go to my ship. My medical team will take care of your injuries." For the first time since her escape, Zara felt a small spark of hope. Someone had listened. Someone believed her. And maybe, just maybe, it was not too late. Zara had never been inside a human ship before. The medical bay of the Endeavor was clean and bright, but not cold like the council chambers. Soft music played in the background, and someone had put a small plant in a pot near her bed. Dr. James Chen worked carefully on the cuts across her shell. His hands were gentle, and he explained everything he was doing before he did it. No one had ever treated her with such care. In Galactic society, Velthari were useful for mining and basic research, but they were not important enough for gentle treatment. "The scarring should fade completely," Dr. Chen said as he finished applying the healing gel. "You were lucky to escape with only surface damage." Ambassador Rodriguez sat in a chair nearby, reviewing Zara's data on a tablet. Captain Sarah Mitchell stood by the door, her arms crossed but her expression kind rather than threatening. "Zara," the ambassador said, "I want you to know that we have already sent the research vessel Galileo to investigate Kepler 442b. Zara's 4 eyes widened. "But the council voted against investigation." Captain Mitchell smiled. "Humans have a saying. When someone falls to their knees in desperation, you do not debate their credentials. You help them stand." Zara asked, "Your people barely know mine. We have never traded much with humans. We are not important to your economy or your politics." Dr. Chen sat down across from her. "May I tell you a story about my people? About 300 years ago, humans almost destroyed themselves with biological weapons. We created diseases that killed millions of our own kind." He pulled up images on his tablet showing old Earth, cities empty and overgrown. "We survived, but barely. Since then, we have promised ourselves that we would never let biological weapons destroy any species, anywhere. It does not matter if other people believe the threat or not." Ambassador Rodriguez leaned forward. "Also, humans tend to care more about what is right than what is politically convenient." A communication alert beeped. Captain Mitchell touched her earpiece and listened for a moment. Her face grew serious. "Captain Torres from the Galileo," she announced. The main screen in the medical bay activated, showing a man with worried eyes and gray hair. Behind him, Zara could see the bridge of the research vessel. "Captain Mitchell, Ambassador Rodriguez," Torres said. "We have a serious problem here. The quarantine buoys around Kepler 442b are not responding." Zara felt her stomach drop. "We are moving closer to investigate," Torres continued. "The planet itself." The image changed to show Kepler 442b from orbit. Zara gasped. The world that had been green and blue just days ago was now completely gray. The entire surface was covered in what looked like a huge fungal network that pulsed with soft light. "Dear God," Dr. Chen whispered. Captain Torres came back on screen. It gets worse. Our long-range sensors are detecting spore clouds drifting away from the planet, Ambassador Rodriguez asked, though Zara already knew the answer and felt sick. Velthar Prime, home world of the Velthari. The room fell silent. Zara started shaking again, but this time it was not from fear. It was from rage. While the council had debated procedures and proper protocols, this thing had grown strong enough to threaten her entire species. Captain Mitchell asked. Torres checked his instruments. At current drift rate, the spore clouds will reach Velthar Prime in approximately 72 hours. But, Captain, there is something else. The biological mass on the planet's surface appears to be actively launching material into space. It is not just drifting anymore. Zara stood up despite Dr. Chen's protests that she should rest. It learned from my colleagues. Dr. Yell 9 was our best navigation specialist. Ambassador Rodriguez was already calling up star charts on her tablet. Captain, set course for Velthar Prime, maximum speed. Send emergency messages to all human vessels in the area. Ambassador, Captain Mitchell said carefully, we do not have council authorization for a sector-wide evacuation. Then they can be angry, Rodriguez replied. Zara tried to warn them the proper way. They chose not to listen. Dr. Chen was running biological simulations on his computer. Zara, I need to ask you about the genetic patterns you observed. Zara thought back to those horrible final days. Yes, it took the Velthari researchers first, then the Garaxians, then the others. It was not random, Dr. Chen said grimly. These genetic patterns show the organism responds to quantum frequencies that match Velthari neural pathways. The implications hit everyone at the same time. This was not just a biological weapon. It was a genocide tool aimed directly at Zara's entire species. Zara whispered. The ruins where we found it were tens of thousands of years old. Maybe someone did not want them to exist as a spacefaring species ever, Ambassador Rodriguez said darkly. Captain Mitchell activated the ship's communication system. All hands, this is the captain. We are now under emergency conditions. Medical teams prepare for large-scale refugee operations. Engineering, I need every bit of speed you can give me. So, as the Endeavour accelerated toward Velthar Prime, Zara stared out the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, 14 billion members of her species were going about their daily lives, unaware that death was drifting toward them through space. But for the first time since her escape, she was not alone in trying to save them. The humans had listened when no one else would. Now she just hoped they were not too late. The human fleet reached Velthar Prime 60 hours before the Grey Death would arrive. Zara stood on the bridge of the Endeavour, watching dozens of human ships position themselves around her home world. She had never seen so many vessels working together for one purpose. Atmospheric entry in 10 minutes, reported Lieutenant Kim at the navigation station. Captain Mitchell looked grim. And we have transport capacity for maybe 9 million if we pack people in like cargo. Zara worked frantically at a science station alongside Dr. Chen and 3 human researchers. They had been trying for 2 days to find a way to stop the gray bloom, but every simulation ended the same way. Once the spores reached a planet with the right atmospheric conditions, nothing could stop them from spreading. The quantum frequency patterns are too complex, Dr. Chen said, rubbing his tired eyes. This thing was designed by someone who understood biological systems better than we do. Ambassador Rodriguez was in constant contact with the Galactic Council, but the responses were always the same. The evacuation procedures required 72 hours of advance notice. Emergency committee meetings had to be scheduled through proper channels. Economic impact studies needed approval from 17 different departments. Ambassador, came a transmission from the council chambers. The Velthari government has not formally requested evacuation assistance. Rodriguez looked like she wanted to throw something. Their government is still debating whether the threat is real. Zara felt a hand on her shoulder. Captain Mitchell was standing beside her, looking down at the blue and green world that had been Zara's home for 47 years. "Zara, I need to ask you something, and I need a completely honest answer. Are you absolutely certain about the timeline?" Zara checked her calculations again, though she had memorized them by now. "The spore clouds are moving faster than we predicted, 60 hours, maybe less, and Captain, when they reach the outer atmosphere, the bloom will begin immediately." Mitchell nodded. She activated the ship's communication system. "All human vessels, this is Captain Mitchell, emergency authorization Omega-7. Begin immediate evacuation operations of all Velthari population centers." "Captain," Lieutenant Kim said nervously, "we do not have council approval for this action." "Then they can arrest me later," Mitchell replied. The evacuation began immediately. Human transport ships landed in every major city on Velthar Prime. At first, most Velthari did not want to leave. The Grey Death was still invisible, still hours away. Their lives, their jobs, their families were all here. Why should they trust these strange humans who claimed the sky was falling? Zara found herself making broadcasts to her people, trying to explain what she had seen on the research colony. Some believed her. Many did not. Families were torn apart as some members agreed to evacuate, while others refused to abandon their homes. The human soldiers were gentle but firm. They carried Velthari children who were too scared to walk. They helped elderly Velthari who could barely move. They worked 18-hour shifts without complaint, knowing that every minute saved more lives. Dr. Chen discovered something that made everything worse. "Zara, look at these atmospheric readings. The gray bloom is not just targeting your people randomly," Captain Mitchell asked. "It means once the bloom finishes with Velthar Prime, it will have learned how to kill every other species in the galaxy. This planet is not just Zara's home." 8.5 million Velthari made it onto the human transport ships. That left over 5 billion still on the planet when the first gray spores reached the upper atmosphere. Zara watched from the bridge as her world began to die. The spores fell like snow, but where they landed, gray fungus began to grow immediately. It spread faster than anything she had seen before, covering buildings, vehicles, and people in minutes rather than hours. "It is learning from the population," Dr. Chen said quietly. "Every person it consumes gives it more knowledge about Velthari biology." The communication channels filled with desperate messages from the planet's surface. Velthari, who had refused to evacuate, now begged for rescue, but it was too late. The gray fungus had already surrounded the remaining population centers. Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos volunteered to lead a final rescue mission. She took 5 small ships down through the spreading spore clouds to reach the last group of survivors in the capital city. "This is Santos," her voice crackled over the radio. "We have visual on approximately 50,000 Velthari barricaded in the central government complex." "Maria, get out of there," Captain Mitchell ordered. "The spore concentration is too high." "Negative, Captain. These people are still alive." Santos and her team managed to evacuate 37,000 more Velthari, but their ships were consumed by the gray fungus before they could escape the atmosphere. Santos's final transmission was calm and clear. "Tell Zara we heard her. Tell her we believed her from the beginning." The explosion, as the rescue ship's reactors overloaded, created a brief gap in the gray coverage. It was not enough to save Santos and her crew, but it allowed the last transport ships to escape with their passengers. 3 days later, Velthar Prime was completely gray. 14 billion people had become part of something hungry and alien. The planet that had been Zara's home for nearly 50 years was now a breeding ground for galactic extinction. Zara stood in the observation deck of the Endeavour, looking at the gray sphere that had once been beautiful and blue. Around her, 8.7 million Velthari refugees tried to understand that they were now the only survivors of their species. Dr. Chen approached her carefully. Zara, I am sorry. No, Zara said quietly. You saved nearly 9 million lives. Your people risked everything for mine, and some of them died trying to save strangers. Lieutenant Commander Santos and her crew are heroes, the council members who voted against investigation. But Zara knew that the gray bloom was not finished. The spores were already spreading toward other inhabited worlds, and now that it had consumed an entire planet of Velthari, it would be ready to adapt for any species it encountered. The real war for galactic survival was just beginning. 1 week after the fall of Velthar Prime, Zara stood in the research laboratory aboard the human colony ship New Haven. Around her, 8 million Velthari refugees were trying to build new lives in human space. The humans had given them entire sections of their colony ships, shared their food, their medicine, their hope. But Zara could not rest. She worked 18 hours a day alongside human xenoarchaeologists, studying every piece of data they had recovered from the ancient ruins. Dr. Chen rarely left the lab either, driven by the same desperate need to understand their enemy. Look at this, Dr. Chen said, pointing to symbols on his screen. These markings from the sealed chamber where you found the gray bloom. Zara felt her blood turn cold. 17? That is what worries me, Chen replied. Cross-referencing with galactic historical records, every major extinction event in the past 50,000 years happened near one of these sites. The Corvani vanished overnight 23,000 years ago. Their home world was 3 light years from one of these ruins. Ambassador Rodriguez entered the lab carrying a cup of coffee and looking like she had not slept in days. I have more bad news. Long-range sensors are detecting gray bloom spores drifting toward the Garaxian home system. The Garaxians have 3 billion people spread across 4 planets, Zara said. It will learn how to consume Garaxian biochemistry, Dr. Chen finished. Then it will adapt for the next species and the next. This is not a random biological weapon. Rodriguez sat down heavily in a chair. The Galactic Council is finally starting to panic, but they still want to handle this through proper diplomatic channels. The Garaxian government is requesting a formal committee to study evacuation procedures. 8 weeks, Zara repeated. A new voice spoke from the laboratory doorway. Captain Mitchell entered, followed by a tall woman in an admiral's uniform that Zara did not recognize. Zara, Dr. Chen, Ambassador Rodriguez, Mitchell said. I would like you to meet Admiral Sarah Chen, commanding officer of the Human Defense Fleet. Admiral Chen stepped forward. Dr. Keth Val, your research has uncovered something that threatens every living species in the galaxy. The current Galactic Council clearly cannot handle this crisis. She activated a holographic display showing the galaxy with dozens of red dots marking archaeological sites. A joint task force led by human ships but including every species willing to participate. Zara stared at the display. That would require the largest fleet in galactic history. Which is why we want you to lead the science mission, Rodriguez said. Not as a refugee, not as someone asking for help. Zara's voice cracked. I am just a xenobiologist. You are the person who figured out what this threat really is, Admiral Chen said firmly. You are the person who tried to warn everyone when there was still time. Dr. Chen nodded enthusiastically. Zara, you have been working on this problem longer than anyone. The Velthari refugees we rescued include some of the galaxy's leading experts on ancient biology. A communication alert sounded. Captain Mitchell activated the main screen, showing incoming transmissions from across the galaxy. The first was from the Zefkari Empire. The energy being that had dismissed Zara's warning weeks earlier now flickered with desperate light. Human Command, we formally request immediate assistance with evacuation procedures. The second transmission was from the Crystalline Concord. We withdraw our previous assessment of Dr. Keth Val's report. More messages followed. The Aquarian Federation wanted human protection for their ocean worlds. The ethereal collective was begging for evacuation ships. Even the proud Nordric Empire was asking for human military assistance. "How times change," Rodriguez said dryly. 3 weeks ago, they thought we were naive young upstarts who did not understand proper galactic procedure. Admiral Chen smiled grimly. "Which gives us the opportunity to set some new rules. Every species that wants human protection will agree to equal treatment for all refugees, shared resources, and joint command structure." And Dr. Bijou, Zara felt overwhelmed. "Admiral, I cannot. The responsibility is too great." "Zara," Captain Mitchell said gently, "you tried to save everyone by going to the Council on your knees. They did not listen. Now you have the chance to save everyone by standing up and taking command." Through the laboratory's viewport, Zara could see human and Velthari children playing together in one of the ship's recreation areas. Human families had opened their homes to Velthari refugees. Human engineers worked alongside Velthari technicians to upgrade the refugee ships. Despite everything they had lost, there was still hope here. Zara asked. Dr. Chen pulled up a star chart. "We have identified 47 archaeological sites that show the same signature as the one where you found the gray bloom." Zara asked. "Population control," Admiral Chen said. "Every time a species becomes too numerous or too independent, one of these weapons activates and resets that region of the galaxy. The current galactic powers are not the original inhabitants of their worlds." The implications were staggering. The entire structure of galactic civilization was built on automated genocide. Zara asked. "Gray bloom spores are now drifting toward inhabited systems throughout the galaxy," Dr. Chen said. "Conservative estimates give us 3 months before we start seeing multiple world killings per week." Zara looked around the room at the humans who had risked everything to save her people. Then she looked out at the refugee ships carrying the last survivors of her species. Finally, she thought about the 14 billion Velthari who had died because the Council refused to listen to one frightened scientist. "I will do it," she said. "Name them," Admiral Chen said. "First, every species that joins this mission contributes equally, regardless of their previous political status. Second, any world we save owes nothing to the species that save them, except the promise to help others in the future." Rodriguez smiled. Within 24 hours, the largest fleet in galactic history began assembling in human space. At its center was a modified research vessel called Zara's Hope. For the first time since escaping from Kepler 442b, Zara was not running from the gray bloom. She was hunting it. 3 months later, Zara stood on the bridge of Zara's Hope as the largest fleet in galactic history approached the Hierarch Nexus. The massive space station had been hidden for thousands of years in a dark nebula, but human deep space sensors had finally found it. Around her, representatives from 47 different species worked together at control stations. The Zefkari energy beings provided power for the weapons systems. Crystalline Concord members handled communications across the fleet. Even former council members who had once dismissed her now followed her orders without question. "All ships report ready, Science Commander," said Captain Torres from his position at the tactical station. The title still felt strange to Zara, but she had earned it through 3 months of successfully hunting down gray bloom weapons across the galaxy. "Thank you, Captain," Zara replied. She activated the fleet communication system. "All vessels, this is Science Commander Kethval. Our long-range scans confirm that this station is the source of all gray bloom weapons." Dr. Chen worked at his science station, analyzing the readings from the enormous structure ahead of them. "Zara, these energy patterns are incredible. The station is not just a base. It is a massive quantum computer." "It would require consciousness," Zara finished. "Not just artificial intelligence." As if responding to her words, the space around the fleet suddenly filled with light. A voice spoke directly into the minds of every person on every ship, regardless of their species or language. Young species, you have traveled far to reach us. We are the hierarchy. We are the shepherds of this galaxy. The fleet stopped moving forward as everyone tried to process what they were hearing. The voice continued. For 60,000 years, we have maintained the balance of life in this galaxy. When species become too numerous, we prune them. When civilizations become too chaotic, we reset them. We are not cruel. Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication system from the human flagship. This is Admiral Chen of the Human Defense Fleet. We are responsible for the survival of the galaxy itself, the hierarchy replied. Without our guidance, biological life would consume all available resources and collapse into chaos. Zara felt sick. We became eternal and wise, but we see potential in your species, humans. You adapt quickly. You organize efficiently. You think in long-term strategies. Join us. Upload your consciousness to our systems. Help us manage the galaxy properly. The fleet communication system crackled with angry voices from dozens of species, but Admiral Chen's reply was calm and clear. We appreciate the offer, but humans have a saying. If you want to know someone's character, watch how they treat people who cannot fight back. You just told us you have been committing genocide for 60,000 years. Foolish, the hierarchy responded. You cannot stop us. Our systems control 47 biological weapons. We can activate them all simultaneously. Dr. Chen looked up from his instruments. Zara, I am reading massive quantum fluctuations from the station. Zara made a decision that would either save the galaxy or doom it. All ships, begin attack pattern Delta 7. Target the quantum processing cores. Zara, Dr. Chen said quietly, the virus has not been fully tested. If it works, it will give every species in the galaxy the freedom to evolve without interference. But the quantum backlash could damage your neural pathways. Better to die free than live as livestock, Zara replied. The battle began as automated defense systems around the station opened fire on the Allied fleet. But this was not just a military battle. As Dr. Chen worked to upload their quantum virus into the hierarchy's systems, Zara found herself in direct mental contact with the ancient digital minds. You do not understand, the hierarchy said directly into her consciousness. We have seen what happens when biological species are left to develop on their own. War, pollution, overconsumption, extinction through stupidity. Zara replied, by never giving them the chance to grow beyond their mistakes? Your people were becoming too numerous, too curious. The mental battle continued as the physical battle raged around them. Human ships used themselves as shields to protect the smaller vessels of other species. Velthari engineers worked frantically to keep weapons systems online. The entire galaxy's future depended on a quantum virus designed by a traumatized refugee and a human scientist who had learned to listen. The virus is ready, Dr. Chen announced. But Zara, I need a direct neural interface to upload it. Do it, Zara said. As the virus uploaded through her nervous system, Zara felt her consciousness expand across the entire hierarchy network. She could see every gray bloom weapon, every extinction protocol, every automated genocide system that had operated in the shadows for millennia. And she could see the hierarchy themselves, not as wise shepherds, but as the last survivors of their own species' self-destruction, so terrified of chaos that they had chosen to murder entire civilizations rather than let them make their own mistakes. You are afraid, Zara said to them. Freedom leads to extinction, they replied. Sometimes, but it also leads to growth, to discovery, to species helping each other survive. Your way guarantees extinction. The virus spread through their systems, not destroying them, but giving them a choice they had not faced in 60,000 years. Remain as automated executioners, or shut down their genocide protocols and let biological species find their own paths. Some hierarchy nodes chose to continue their ancient mission and were quietly deleted by the virus. Others chose to shut down peacefully, their digital consciousnesses finally finding rest. The gray-bloom weapons went silent across the galaxy. 6 months later, Zara stood before the new Galactic Council in a chamber built on human designs. But this time, she was not on her knees. She wore the uniform of Science Director of Galactic Defense, and around her sat representatives from every species that had survived the hierarchy's long reign of terror. "The final gray-bloom weapon has been located and neutralized," she announced. "The immediate extinction threat is over, but we must remember what we learned." She looked around the room at faces that once would have dismissed her warnings without consideration. This new council operates on different principles. When someone falls to their knees in desperation, we help them stand. When someone warns of danger, we listen first and debate later. Ambassador Rodriguez, now the first Secretary General of the Reformed Galactic Alliance, stood to address the Assembly. The vote was unanimous. As the session ended, Zara walked to the observation deck where Earth hung blue and green in the void. "Doctor," Chen joined her, carrying 2 cups of the coffee that had become her favorite human beverage. He asked. Zara thought about the 14 billion Velthari who had died, about Lieutenant Commander Santos and her crew who had sacrificed themselves for strangers, about the months of desperation before anyone believed her warnings. "I regret that it took so long for people to listen," she said. Through the viewport, she could see ships from dozens of species working together to build new colonies for refugees, to explore planets left empty by ancient genocides, to make sure that no species would ever again face extinction alone. "You know, Dr. Daitsambaretz, when you fell to your knees, every human in the room felt it. Not just Ambassador Rodriguez. All of us. There is something about seeing someone that desperate, that alone, that makes humans physically unable to walk away. We are not necessarily braver than other species, or smarter or stronger." Zara smiled. "That is why you won, you know. Not because you had better weapons or faster ships." In the distance, a new colony ship was launching toward a world that had been empty for 20,000 years. On board were families from 12 different species, working together to build something the hierarchy had never imagined possible. A future chosen freely, with all its beautiful, chaotic, dangerous possibilities. Sometimes salvation comes not from those who rule from above, but from those willing to kneel beside you and listen to your pain.